and Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
Hello everyone. Let us today now begin with yet another interesting chapter of history, and this chapter carries a weightage of 10 marks. So I have divided the chapter into two parts. Today I will be dealing with part 1 of the chapter because it's quite a lengthy chapter, and part 2 will be in the next session. After I finish the first session, this session, I have also prepared some kind of model questions for you which are usually asked in the exam. So we will be also going through them. Before I begin the chapter, let me tell you that it's a very interesting chapter of history. It speaks about a huge kingdom, it speaks about a huge empire which was born, okay, because of two people who are called as Hookah and Bukka. We will be talking about them later on, but to every Indian history there is some kind of discovery. Just like as I have told you, Indus Valley civilization or the Harappan civilization we have learnt in the previous chapter were discovered by accident because they were laying railway line from Lahore to Peshawar, and these two British engineers suddenly stumbled upon a lot of brickbats. Okay. And then we also see how Rakhaldas Banerjee, the archaeologist, started the excavations at these sites, and a new chapter of history was uncovered or unearthed. Okay. Likewise, we have also seen how James Prinsep deciphered Brahmi and Kharoshti, and because of this you find the whole history of the 6th century BC coming to light. Okay. New inscriptions were read, new inscriptions were deciphered. We come across this name Ashok who was given the titles of Devanampiya or who was called as beloved of the gods. So you find most of this Indian history has a person or has somebody who has come across or stumbled by accident. Okay. Likewise, the same thing has happened with the case of Ajanta caves also. Now, this empire was also a huge empire which covered almost the whole part of South India. Now, how this empire came into existence, we will be talking about it later on. But I want you to focus or just pay attention of how this empire was discovered. The first the first instance of how this empire was brought to light was, we have in 1800 a person who was a British engineer and an antiquarian. His name was Colin Mackenzie, and this Colin Mackenzie suddenly came across some ruins in Karnataka. Now, when I say the word antiquarian, it means that he was fond of collecting antiques. Antiques means collecting old objects or objects of historic importance. So it could be an old pot or an old basket or an old casket, okay, or an old trunk, whatever, which has some historic or heritage value. So this fellow was interested in history. He was interested in heritage objects. And suddenly when he was going across in the jungles of a part of Karnataka, he stumbled across some ruins in Karnataka. Now, you see on the screen, you see Colin Mackenzie and the map of Karnataka. I have highlighted the map, and the maps is, I have circled a place which shows the exact location where Colin Mackenzie came across these ruins. Now, these ruins were excavated, and he came to know that when these ruins were slowly discovered, excavated, small excavations started, and they came to know that they were located exactly on the Krishna Tungabhadra Doab. Now, what are these names, Krishna and Tungabhadra? They are the name of two rivers. Krishna is a river which flows from the north, comes to the south, and Tungabhadra is yet another river which flows through Karnataka. Now, what do you mean by the Doab? The Doab is a fertile valley which is formed by two rivers. So exactly on the Krishna Tungabhadra Doab, you can see on the screen, that is a Google map of India. You can see the Arabian Sea, and you can see I have highlighted in dark blue the Tungabhadra river, which starts from Shimoga and comes up till or flows into Andhra, and the light blue river which starts from Maharashtra and comes down and somewhere meets this Tungabhadra river in Andhra. Okay, so both these rivers, Krishna and Tungabhadra, okay, the fertile valley which was caused because of these two rivers is called as a Krishna Tungabhadra Doab, or today it is also called as a Raichur Dog. Now this Raichur Dog was the heartthrob of this empire. Okay, we will talk about it later on why. Later on we find somewhere 36 years later, Epigraphies started collecting inscriptions. I need not tell you who are the Epigraphies, because we have come across this word in the second and the third chapter also. But yet Epigraphies are people who decipher inscriptions. They collect inscriptions, they try to read the inscriptions and interpret the inscriptions. So these epigraphies should be well versed in the script and the language in which the inscriptions are found. So there are the people who can read Brahmi, there are people who can read Sanskrit, there are people who can read Kharoshti. Okay, so there are many epigraphies. Now these inscriptions which were found here were mostly in Sanskrit, Kannada, Telugu and also in Tamil. But whichever were found in Karnataka were mostly in Kannada. Okay, so here you have a small piece of an inscription which was found in that region. Now later on, say another 20 years later on down the line, we find photographers start recording the monuments. Now when I say photographers record the monuments, that does not mean that photographer at that time recording, that is movement of, motion pictures, I would use the word. Motion pictures were not there. Okay, the camera was, the camera which was used would only click still pictures. And I would like to just tell you what kind of cameras were used at that time. If you have watched these Bollywood movies, you will see that a person has a big huge tripod stand. On that there is a huge box which is mounted, and behind that the photographer goes, covers his head with a cloth and then clicks the picture. So such kinds of cameras were existent during that time. We should remember that I am talking about a period or a phase of the 19th century where technology was not as developed as it is today. So imagine these people going with the huge boxes of huge cameras which could not be damaged through the jungles and through these mountains just to get a glimpse of these monuments. And here you have some of these early pictures of this the whole ruins. You can see a stone chariot on the screen, you can see an old temple on the screen, and this is how, or this is the condition in which these ruins, or today they are called as monuments, today they belong to the World Heritage Site, UNESCO. Okay, so this is how the monuments were found. And here you have yet another picture which shows a small mandap, and you can see the vegetation, you can see it has been covered by vegetation. Some parts of it have already been collapsed. Yet another picture of so-called elephant stable today. Okay, you can see a huge monument which has got arches, and in between you can see you have a big arch which they say that perhaps this structure was used to keep royal elephants. So today it is addressed as elephant stable. Now whatever information these people had got, like right from 1800 Colin Mackenzie going there, then you find in 1836 epigraphists going there collecting the information which was found in the inscriptions. Then you find in 1856 photographers going there, kind of clicking pictures. Whole information, all this which was collected, the data or this information was now being collated with the accounts of the foreign travelers. Now what do I mean by that? Okay, this empire or this whole kingdom which I am going to talk to you, which I am talking to you about, and soon I will be telling you the name of this kingdom. Okay, his whole kingdom was visited by many travelers. Right from travelers who came from Persia, right from travelers we have who came from Portugal also. Okay, like you have Barbosa Duarte or you have Abdur Razak, all these people who came to visit the kingdom. These people had written or mentioned about the kingdom. So now what these people are doing, the historians were trying to do, they were now trying to correlate whatever they found on the site and whatever was found in the accounts of these travelers. Yet another source which gave them information about this kingdom was the literature which was found in Tamil, Telugu, Kannada and Sanskrit. Okay, Vijayanagar king like Krishna Devaraya is he is said to be a very good writer. He has written a very good piece which is called as Amukta Malayadam. So all these were well knowledge, learned people. Okay, so this also gave them information. Finally, they came to know that this empire, today it is called as Hampi. This place got the name Hampi because of the local goddess who is worshipped there and called as Pampa Devi. Okay, so from the name Pampa Devi, this place might have got the name as Hampi. Now also there were memories of the priests of the Virupaksha Temple and the Pampa Devi shrine. Okay, so this information was also taken because though the whole area was in ruins, there were many temples, there were many mandaps, there were many pavilions. There were only few temples which were functional, like the Virupaksha Temple and the Pampa Devi shrine. So there were priests who would go there to perform the rituals. So information was also based, okay, from the memories of these priests. Remember, this name has to be pronounced as Virupaksha and not Virupaksha. Okay, so this information was collected from the Virupaksha temple also. And what we come before and what we came to know what was revealed was an imperial capital which was called as Vijayanagar. So under the chapter an imperial capital, we are going to study more about the Vijayanagar kingdom. Now, the kingdom, according to historical records, was founded by two kings who are called as Hookah and Bukka, and this happened somewhere in 1336. So how will you remember this date? 1336. One has to be remembered. Every date has a 1. Okay, so 1 is there. Then you have two 3's, 1336. You can see it on the screen in white. So 3 plus 3 is equal to 6. So that is how you can remember this date, 1336. 3 plus 3 is equal to 6. Now there is a small history which is told about this Hookah and Bukka, which is not there for you in the syllabus, but there is a small kind of a background. These people were abducted by the Muslim kings and they were kidnapped and they were taken. Okay, some say they were taken to war. There are many theories and many versions to it. Some say they were taken to Warangal and they were kept. They escaped from there and on the way they come across a person in the forest who is called as Vidyaranya Swami or Vidyaranya Guru. Okay, and that is how, under the guidance of Vidyaranya Swami or Vidyaranya Guru, these people established the Vijayanagar Empire. Okay, Vijayanagar. Vijay means victory. Nagar means the city. It is not to be pronounced as Vijayanagara. It has to be pronounced as Vijayanagar. Okay, though it is written as Vijayanagara. So what happened? Later on, after this, the first dynasty who is supposed to have taken over is the Sangam dynasty. Remember, we cannot call this as Vijayanagar dynasty. Why? Because there were around 4 dynasties in the kingdom of Vijayanagar. Vijayanagar is the name of the kingdom and not the name of the dynasty. Just like how you have the Kadam dynasty or how you have the Chalukyan dynasty or the Shilhar dynasty, Vijayanagar is not the name of the dynasty, it is not the name of the ruling family, it is the name of the city where these people were ruling. And in the city, you have 4 different families who ruled, 4 different dynasties who ruled. One was the Sangam dynasty. It is written as Sangama, but it is to be pronounced as Sangam, from 1336 to 1485. The second were the Saluas. The third was the Tuluva. And in that Tuluva dynasty, you have the most famous ambitious king whose name was Krishna Devaraya. Okay, again here the pronunciation is Krishna Devaraya, not Krishna Devaraya, though it is written with an A. Okay, it is to be pronounced as Krishna Devaraya. He was a very famous king. He is supposed to have done a lot of developments, conquered many other kingdoms also, subdued many other kings, expanded the empire, which you are going to learn about him later on. And the last dynasty, 4th dynasty, was the Aravidu dynasty. After the Aravidu dynasty, the whole empire slowly came to an end. Now, let us go to yet some more development and features of these Vijayanagar kings. These kings were constantly competing between the contemporary Deccan sultans and the Gajapati rulers of Odisha. Okay, and here if you look at the map, you will come to know exactly what I am trying to tell you. You can see in the pink, okay, the whole Indian peninsula is taken over by the Vijayanagar kingdom, by the Vijayanagar kings. Okay, and except for the ones which you can see in orange, that is Ahmednagar, Bijapur, Berar, Bidar, okay, and Golconda. These were the Deccan sultans. And to the right hand side you can see, to the east of India you can see the Gajapati rulers who were ruling over Odisha. So there was always a tension between the Deccan sultans, the Vijayanagar kings and the Gajapati rulers of Odisha. Okay, and what was the tension for? It was only for that, that Raichur Dog. Of course, there were other reasons for the tension also, but everyone wanted to take over that Raichur Dog because that was a very fertile valley. Okay, and as you know, in the olden times and even today, agriculture is the basic requirement of any country. Food production has to be focused on if the country has to develop. Likewise, you find the Vijayanagar were having the control over this Raichur Doab, that Krishna Tungabhadra Doab, and because of that there were constant tensions. All these three were competing with each other. Later on we find that these people slowly took over the Chol of Tamil Nadu and the Hoysals of Karnataka, and they extended patronage to temples like Brihadeshwar temple of Tamil Nadu, which is supposed to be one of the tallest temples, and the Chandakeshav temple of Belur. So here I would like to draw your attention back to the map again. Now you can see on the map the whole region which is in the south, okay, the whole peninsula. You can see this region is shaded in pink, and here you find the Hoysals and the Chol who were already ruling over Vijayanagar, and Vijayanagar Empire has now taken over them also. But on the top you can see the cluster of these kingdoms which are called as the kingdoms of the Deccan Sultans. To the east of India, you can see in purple the Gajapati rulers of Odisha are still having a hold over eastern India. Now what I was trying to tell you is that these three people, these three rulers had constant fights or constant warfare. They were engaged in constant warfare. Now on the screen I showed you about how the Vijayanagar took over the kingdoms of Chol and the Hoysal kingdoms. When they took over these kingdoms, they started extending patronage, or they started giving donations, developing the temples which are already built in the South Indian region. Like for example, you have a temple which is called as a temple of Brihadeshwar, which is supposed to be one of the tallest in India. and the Chandakeshav temple of Belur. One is in Tamil Nadu, which was built by the Chol, and the one in Belur was built by the Hoysal kings. Here you find the temple of Brihadeshwar. Okay, the front portion of the temple, the mandap where you can see the Nandi bull seated, that was constructed during the Vijayanagar period. But the backside, the original temple, the shikhar, that is the spire of the temple, was constructed by Raja Chol in the 11th century. Okay, so this is how Vijayanagar kings started extending patronages to these temples to show their, to show that the kingdom now belongs to them. Okay. So later on you find that many, when a kingdom comes into being, or when there is a kingdom which is there, you find many things newly start. Okay. You find trade, commerce a part of the kingdom, you find agriculture becoming a part of the kingdom, economic activities start increasing in the kingdom, just like what we have seen in the case of Harappan civilization, wherein we have seen how the civilization developed. We have also seen the economic activities happening in Harappa. Then we spoke about weights, we spoke about seals. Okay, so here now today we are going to also touch upon the trade and the commerce happening in Vijayanagar kingdom. So these kings were called as Raya. Okay, the kings were called as Raya. Okay, and the traders who were dealing inside or who were trading were called as Chettis. Now, warfare depended completely on cavalry. Cavalry means warriors who fought on horseback. Okay, and here you have scenes which depict in the Vijayanagar kingdom where people are using well-bred horses, okay, for fighting, or it's a war scene which shows a warrior holding a sword in his hand, and in the other hand he is holding the reins of the horse, and he is trying to fight a battle. So horses had to be of the best quality, and India did not have good quality horses at that time, and the best quality horses were supposed to be coming from Arabia or Central Asia. So these horses, which are supposed to be of the best quality, were imported to India from Arabia and Central Asia. And here, that is the reason why you see such kinds of horse trade began in the empire. Okay, if you just look at the panel, it is found in one of the temples of Vijayanagar. You will find the horse traders have come. There is, to the right hand side, to the extreme right, you will find a person is negotiating with his fingers. Okay, he is showing his fingers, and maybe it's a kind of a negotiation or a deal going on, and the other one is holding his waist to show that he is not agreeing to the deal, and in the other hand he is holding two horses. And towards the end of the second horse, you can find yet another figure who is standing besides the horse and is not bothered, he is not looking at what is happening. That shows that he could be the attendant who has come with the master to trade the horses. Okay, so you see yet more such scenes. Many beautiful scenes are depicted on the walls of these temples. Like you find in the first scenario, there is a person who is pulling the horse. So perhaps he has bought the horse, and in the second also the other person is also pulling the horse along with them. So he has bought two horses. So there are various ways of interpreting these panels or these friezes, and they are all seen in the temples, on the outside walls of the temples today, which is called as Hampi. So if you go to Hampi, you will find all these things, and you will be able to get a kind of a social and a cultural idea of the Vijayanagar Empire at that time. And the trade was completely controlled by the Arabs and local merchants who are called as Kudrei Chetti. Now, this is a very important term which is being used here. First of all, we need to understand why the trade was controlled by the Arabs and the local merchants. Whenever we import something from outside, obviously you have the person coming with that particular product to our place or to our country. Now when the person comes here, he just cannot get into the market and sell his products. he has to get in touch with the traders. So that is how these Arabs or these people from Central Asia who came with the horses, they got in touch with the local traders, the chettis who I mentioned. And these chettis who dealt with horses especially were called as Kudre chettis. Kudre means a horse in Kannada. It is not to be pronounced as Kudirai. Okay, it's supposed to be pronounced as Kudre Chetti, which means the horse dealers of Hampi or horse dealers in Karnataka. Okay, it's a Kannada word. Now here also you find a very interesting panel which shows the person holding two horses. Now look at the picture, look at the way he is dressed. He doesn't appear that he is a localite, he is a Kudre Chetti. It looks that he is belonging to some other part and not belonging to India. Perhaps he might belong to Central Asia, or he might also be an Arab who has come with his horses to trade. So these Kudre Chettis were constantly in touch with the local with the Arab traders. Again, to the corner you see the person who is standing with a stick in his hand, he doesn't appear to be an Indian. Look at the features, look at his features of the face, look at the eyes, look at the eyebrows, look at the cap he is wearing, and look at the gown he is wearing. That shows that he could be perhaps from Central Asia. And here you have the another figure who is holding his right hand, smiling, looking at the horse. That only depicts that he's got a good deal or good price for the horse. So why I am trying to show you these pictures is for us to understand how horses were how warfare and trade was very closely connected to each other in the Vijayanagar kingdom at that time. Later on we also find yet another trader trading community who came from a particular country and who came as traders initially, okay, or explorers you can say. We have learnt about them in the 11th standard, okay, the Portuguese. In 1498 you find the Portuguese coming to India. They came to Calicut first, okay, and these Portuguese now tried to establish military stations. They were superior to the Indians with regards to one thing, and that was the technology and a special kind of gun which was called as the musket. Musket was a special kind of long barreled gun which the Portuguese had a monopoly over. Okay, so now again you find 3 and 4 and 5 traders coming inside. You find the Arabs coming in. You find the people from traders from Central Asia coming in. Then you have a Kudre Chetti, a community forming in Vijayanagar. And to add to that, now you have Portuguese coming in. They also become very important players in the trading scenario at that time. So apart from all this, Vijayanagar was known for its market, internationally known I would use the word, because many, if you just read the accounts of these travelers, okay, like there's a book by Robert Sewell, okay, he writes about Vijayanagar kingdom. There are some books written by, there are some accounts written by Duarte, okay. He writes about Vijayanagar kingdom, and this Vijayanagar kingdom is described for its unparalleled peace and prosperity. Vijayanagar kingdom was known for its market, as I have spoken to you about. It was known for its spices, textiles, precious stones and highly valued exotic goods, stones, jewelry, perfumes, and you find such kinds of markets which are found today, and excavations were going on, site clearances were going on, and you find such kinds of lines of market outside the temple. So there's a Krishna temple which is found there, and outside the temple there is a market which is called as a Krishna Bazaar. Okay, so all these temples were lined with markets. Here you find yet another Google image of the ruins of temples and how these markets were lined, how these markets were kind of the layout of the city. You can get a kind of a bird's eye view from this picture. Now I spoke to you about Krishna Devaraya. He was a very, very famous king, a very good writer. He had a lot of many good advisors in his kingdom. Okay, Tenali Raman was one of the personalities who was there, which was present in his kingdom at that time. Now Krishna Devaraya, we have very few portraits about this king. Okay, one of this portrait is in the form of a bronze sculpture where you can see him with Chinnamma Devi and Tirumala Devi, and in between you can see Krishna Devaraya. There are many who describe Krishna Devaraya. They say that he is a king who has got a very good physique, a long, tall physique, slender body, okay, and has small marks of smallpox on his face. So those people who came, who saw Krishna Devaraya, have described him. He basically consolidated the empire. The whole empire, which was into bits and pieces, was brought together. Land between the Tungabhadra and the Krishna rivers, which is called as a Raichur Dog today, was acquired. Rulers of Odisha were subdued and the sultans of Bijapur were defeated. As I have told you in the previous case, all these were pouncing upon the Vijayanagar kingdom. So this fellow Krishna Devaraya tried to consolidate the empire. He tried to silence many rulers of many Deccan sultans who were trying to pounce on the kingdom. Also he tried to silence the Gajapati rulers of Odisha. Here you have yet another map of India where you can see now the whole of South India has come under Vijayanagar. You find it is covering a part of Goa now. Let me also tell you that Goa also came under the Vijayanagar kings. You find 4 or 5 inscriptions of Devaraya II, Devaraya II, okay, which are found in Goa, and they mention about their administration in Goa. And the most famous inscription of the Vijayanagar period, dating to the 15th century, is also found in Goa, and that is in Ponda Taluka today, just outside the temple of Nagesh in Bandoda or Nageshi. If you go to the temple, you can have a look at the inscription. That is the inscription of Devaraya II. Okay. So here you have the Vijayanagar Empire, which is shown right from Goa till you find it goes up till the Odisha, the eastern belt, okay, and the South India is now coming under the Vijayanagar Empire. Now yet there were some more developments of Krishna Devaraya. The kingdom flourished under this king. Fine temples were built, and these temples had very impressive Gopurams. We will speak about what is a Gopuram later on, okay, but I'll just tell you I'll just show you a picture of Gopuram right now, and you can see from the picture a Gopuram is basically a temple gateway. We have to know that, okay. Just before entering the temple, in all the South Indian temples, Gopuram are a must. This kind of architecture developed during this era, Vijayanagar Empire era, and every temple had a Gopuram, a gateway. Okay, in Kokani we call it Pravesh Dwar. And why it is called as a Gopuram? Some say that the name Go means a cow, and because it has the horns of a cow, it is called as a Gopuram. Okay, that means a gateway of the temple coming from the cows, walking through the cows body and coming out, okay, because in the Hindu religion passing a baby under the cow's belly is supposed to be very auspicious, okay. So earlier these traditions were done. So here you have a Gopuram, and why were these Gopurams built? Very interesting. These Gopurams were kind of built to create an impression that the kings are ruling over this area. And another thing is, you could sight the city, you could sight the temple from far off distance. Okay, so these impressive Gopurams were built. He also founded a township which is called as a Nagalapuram after his mother, which was named after his mother. So these are the achievements of Krishna Devaraya. Very interesting personality, very interesting character, and supposed to have contributed many things to the Vijayanagar kingdom. Now such a big kingdom, such a huge vast empire, obviously it will have enemies, and during that time Enemies were the worst threat to a kingdom. Okay, today also if you see any country, we try to also give importance to our military. We also try to give importance to the area where the military is. Okay, like you take in the case of the north of India or the west of India, we try to protect our borders. Likewise, in those times also, the Vijayanagar kings emphasized on protection of their borders, or fortifications were a must. Now, how do we learn about these fortifications of the Vijayanagar kingdom? There was an ambassador by name Abdur Razak. This Abdur Razak was basically a ruler of Persia, and when he had come to India, he visited Kozhikode, that is Calicut, and from there he decides to pay a visit to the Vijayanagar kingdom, and he goes there and he is greatly impressed by the fortifications. He feels that these fortifications are nowhere else. He says that I have not seen such kinds of fortifications which protect a kingdom. And what does he say? He mentions 7 lines of forts. Okay, and here you have a picture which shows us a few lines of fortification, but they are in ruins. Okay, you find on the top there is one fortified wall, then there is one more, and below if you go there are 3 or 4 walls which keep on circling the region. These encircle the city, the agricultural land and the forest. So it was just not restricted to protecting the kingdom, just not one fortification. So he mentioned that the 7 lines of fortification which was difficult for an enemy to break in and come to the royal center or come to the place where the kings lived. Here you have yet one more picture which shows us a fortified royal center or a fortified area. Okay, so the outermost wall, he says, was linked to the hills and the surrounding the city. So this is the outermost wall which you can see on the screen. Okay, it was connecting the hills. As you can see in the picture, the fortified wall has been brought and it has been touched to a natural boulder or natural stones. Okay, so this is how the fortified linked the hills. The masonry was tapered and it was narrow at the top and broad at the base. This was done so that the fortification stands still. Okay, because the base has to be broader, otherwise what will happen if you make it narrower, it will collapse. So no mortar or cementing agent was used, very important aspect. Okay, and yet another thing is the stone blocks were wedge shaped which held them in place. What do you mean by the term wedge shaped? Here I have shown you 2 pictures wherein you can see wedges. Okay, the stone blocks on the right hand side, they were fused together, okay, by making them wedge shaped, and then these were hammered or these were placed inside to build a fort or a fortification. The inner portion which the blocks made, there was of course there was some kind of cavity after those wedge shaped blocks were placed inside like this. Okay, so the inner portion was filled with rubble, and here you have a section of the stone wall which you can see on the screen. It is a wedge shaped stone wall. You can see it's a tapering stone wall, okay, which is tapering at the top and broad at the base, and then you can see some wedge shaped blocks which have been put inside, and the cavity which is there, the hollow space which is there, is filled with rubble and stone. Okay, so this is how the fortification was. It controlled, it protected a lot many regions. Abdur Razak also mentions that there was between the first, second and the third wall, okay, between the first, second and the third fortification, there were cultivated fields, gardens and houses. Agricultural tracts were between the fortified region. Okay, now why did they fortify agricultural tracts? For the simple reason that in the olden times there were sieges. Sieges means gherao. Okay, the enemy would come and they would surround the fort and would remain outside stationed for days together. And the siege, we don't know, it would start from, it would end in one day, it would end in 2 days, 3 days, and sometimes the enemy would also be camping outside the fort for 1 year. Now this was done to ensure that the person who has locked himself inside the fort surrenders, because they were having a dearth of supply of food and water. Obviously anybody cannot remain in 1 year in the fort without a constant supply of food and water, okay, because food has to be there. Now in such cases, when the enemy would do a gherao, okay, and would station himself outside the fort, this was a problem which was solved by fortifying the agricultural tract. So even if the enemy was there outside for 2 years, 3 years stationed outside, in case of the Vijayanagar Empire, the kings were not bothered, because the agricultural tracts were inside, the agricultural fields were inside. So enemy was there outside, here production was going on, here there was no dearth of food and water, it was they were cultivating crops aram se, and the person was stationing himself or camping outside, and finally he would get fed up and he would probably leave the siege. That word is called as siege, and in Kokani we call it as gherao. So a siege would starve the defenders and force them to submit, and that is the reason why the rulers often prepared for such sieges by building granaries within the fort. So agricultural production was going on in spite of the person being surrounded, or in spite of the kingdom being surrounded by the enemy. Second fortification went round the inner core or the urban complex. The third surrounded the royal center. Here you can see, this is just an image which I have made, that we understand how the empire might be fortified. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of fortification which you can see. Perhaps this was the strategy they used to defend the kingdom. The fort was well guarded by gates. You can see these are the pictures of gates of the Vijayanagar kingdom. Today it is in Hampi. If you go there, you can see it. Okay, so these are some of the architectural styles by which the gates were built. This is a watchtower. Okay, and here you have yet one more gate where you can see an arc. Okay, so such kinds of arcs on the gates or on the windows, they say, or the dome. Okay, they say it's an influence of the architecture of the Turkish sultans. So you can see a gateway here, it has an arc, okay, it's called as a mihrab arc. On the top there is a dome. So such kind of structure was not a part of the Indian architecture. Okay, these styles were it's a confluence, it's a combination of Indian as well as Islamic architecture, and that is the reason why such kind of structures are called as said to be of Indo-Islamic art. So if you just look at the strategies which are applied by the Vijayanagar kings, to protect or to expand or to consolidate their empire, they were fabulous strategies, and they have planned these cities in such a way that all of them got protection. Okay, yet we have one more section in the city which is called as the urban core. Chinese and porcelain pieces have been found in this area, which suggests that this might have been occupied by rich traders. On the screen you can see porcelain pieces which are found in excavations. So perhaps these were brought by the traders, and then they might have slept it there. It was also a Muslim residential quarters. Okay, there are tombs and mosques which look like the mandaps of the temples. So here you have yet one more structure which you can see on the screen. It looks like a mandap, temple mandap. Look at the pillars, look at the style, but it is actually a mosque. Okay, so such kinds of tombs and mandaps, such kinds of tombs and mosques which are existing or found in the urban core. Actually they are built in the style of Hindu architecture. Okay, but they look like mandaps of temples. And you also find that houses of ordinary people have not survived. Portuguese traveller Barbo's mentions that ordinary houses had thatched roof and the arrangement was according to the occupations. So we know that ordinary people might not have used good quality stone or good quality building material, and they had this thatched roof, means a sloping roof like how we find in Goa. Now obviously they might have not survived, so they might have, we don't get a very good idea of how these houses might have looked like. But Barbos mentions that they were thatched, okay, and they were arranged according to occupations. Like you find all the carpenters residing in one area, you find all the potters residing in one area, you find all the coppersmith residing in one area. This arrangement is even found in Goa today. So I will end my first session here, and accordingly I have just prepared some model question papers, model questions, okay, which we will just go through before I wind up, and it will give you a brief idea of how questions can be probably asked on what I have dealt with or what I have taught today. So first question is, explain the sources used to study the Vijayanagar Empire. So you have to start with how Vijayanagar Empire was discovered. Like in 1800 I told you, the British engineer Colin Mackenzie came across some ruins in Karnataka. In 1836 I told you Epigraphies began collecting inscriptions. After 20 years in 1856 we also spoke about how photographers began creating a record of these inscriptions and monuments. Then information was collated with accounts of foreign travelers. Tamil, Telugu, Kannada and Sanskrit literature was also looked into, and information was also initially based on the memories of the priests of the Virupaksha Temple and Pampa Devi shrine. The question may come for 3 marks, the question can come for 4 marks. You have to write any 4 points as it is asked. Next one, how was warfare related to trade? What was their connection? Warfare depended on cavalry. Horses were imported from Arabia and Central Asia. Trade was controlled by the Arabs and the local merchants who are called as Kudre Chettis. It's a Kannada word, keep in mind. In 1498, the Portuguese also tried to establish their military stations. New kind of technology came in, and a new kind of gun, which was a long barrel gun called as the musket, was introduced by the Portuguese. What were the achievements of Krishna Devaraya? He consolidated the empire. The land between the Tungabhadra and the Krishna river, which is called as a Raichur Dog, was acquired. Rulers of Odisha were subdued and the sultans of Bijapur were defeated. So this is how the consolidation took place. The kingdom flourished under this king. Fine temples with impressive Gopurams were built, and he founded a township which is called as the Nagalapuram, and he named it after his mother. Again, I have highlighted 5 points. You can write 4 points if it is asked for 4 marks, or 3 points if it is asked for 3 marks. Then another question can come on fortifications and also on gateways. If it is asked for on fortification, you could mention these points, like Abdul Razak, who was a ambassador who came from Persia to Kozhikode or Calicut, mentions that there were 7 lines of fort. These encircled the city, agricultural land and forests. The outermost walls linked the hills surrounding the city. The masonry construction was tapered, as I have told you. No mortar or cementing agent was used. Stone blocks were wedge shaped, which were holding them in place. The inner portion was filled with rubble. Square or rectangular bastions projected outwards. Again, I have highlighted, or I have shown you, or I am flashing all the 7 points whichever are there in the textbook, but based on the weightage you have to write the answer. The last or the second last one is, why were the agricultural tracts fortified? We have spoken about it in length. Okay, they were fortified because whenever there would be a siege or a ghera, as I have told you, the enemies would want to starve the defenders and force them to submit. Hence the rulers prepared themselves for such sieges by building granaries within the fort. There could be a question on gateways and roads. When it is asked on gateways, you can write the following points. The fort was guarded by gates. The arc on the gateway there was a dome, or there was an arc on the gateway, which is an influence of the architecture of the Turkish sultans, and this style is called as Indo-Islamic style of architecture. And if it is asked for a question on roads, then you can write these 2 points. The roads wound around the valleys, avoiding the rain. Some of them extended from the temple gateways and most of them were lined with bazaars. So with this, I will end my session 1 of the Vijayanagar Empire. In this next session of the same chapter, we will talk something more about the architecture and we will also discuss some more questions. Thank you.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.